The stars kept a book we never closed. The survey skiff drifted inside the broken husk of the ring yard, its lights carved into fog by ancient dust. My visor picked up a glow where no glow should be. A slow pulse under plates of basalt black hull fused into the ruin like a swallow in tar. The pulse matched my heartbeat until it didn't. Then it set its own cadence, patient, implacable, old as long memory. We hadn't come for ghosts. We came for salvage with proper permits and a magistrate streamer, the kind that curtained over pirates like rain. The first hum rolled through our suits, harmonic and low, and in it rode a whisper of arrays sleeping. "I'm not hearing that," Lieutenant Malik said, which meant he absolutely was in his feed. I saw his mouth tighten against a prayer. Commander Juno strapped our skiff to a rib of the ring and let the boots cling. She believed in weight even where the math didn't. The glow throbbed again, a sigil under slag, a glyph that unfolded as if breathing. It formed a hexagon with a notch missing, like a key cut away from a keyhole. My palms sweated inside the gloves, which is unhelpful in vacuum. But the brain remembers sweat better than the body forgets fear. "Doctor," Arata Juno's voice was clipped, but steady. She had a reputation for standing next to lines people said you shouldn't cross. "You're up." The first thing I did was a thing my advisor would have mocked. I listened. The hum wasn't random. It carried a beat of ratios. 3-tone sequence repeating at intervals of 13. Then a silence that wasn't empty so much as expecting. I sent a handshake on public channels. Magistrate badge first, then research house credentials. The ring yard gave nothing back except dust sifting in slow spirals and a whisper like brushes on a drum. The sigil brightened, and the slag above it curled as if heated by breath. "Mali," I said. "Scan for any residual data lattice in the basalt plates. Minor interference patterns. Think archaic quantum braids." "Getting something," he said. "No protocol I know." "It's like an abacus built into a storm." "Friendly?" Juno asked. "Or the kind that wants to count us into smaller pieces?" "We're about to find out." A thin seam snapped open, sloughing brittle rock into a cloud that spun away like ground glass. Beneath lay whole metal, older than our charter, older than the ring itself if my clock was honest, a geometry of plates that nested with sickening precision. The sigil widened, the missing notch pointing into a channel cut through the ruin like a processional aisle. Sarah, our ensign, breathed. "It looks like the hull is listening. It looks like it's judging how bad we want to be on the wrong side of history," Malik said. I sent a second handshake. "This one in the old codes we teach cadets to laugh at and archivists to revere. My screen populated with nothing. My bones populated with everything." The hum slid up by a fractional interval and a string of lights bloomed inside the channel. Each one the color of a cooled forge. I thought of the old stories of saintship's human war machines with consciences coded into capstans. Ships that swore oaths and meant them. Ships that made enemies sign receipts before firing. We could have forced it. We had cutters that would have made the plates sing like struck bowls. And if the plates cried, we would have called it echo. Juno's harness creaked as she turned my way. "Your call," she said. "You're the one with the keys to dead angels." "Don't call it an angel," I said. "Angels don't take ledgers." She didn't smile, which is why I trust her. "We don't force open the door. We're asking to guard." We went in 2 by 2. The way science pretends is about safety, but is mostly about witness. Inside, the dust layer thinned into a delicate crust that broke under magnets like frost under boots. The channel sloped down into a chamber whose ceiling carried a relief of numbers like constellations, primes studded like nails in ironwood, positional dots stitched into arcs, a language that would rather be counted than said. The air was nothing, but my mind swore it smelled like old paper and cold iron. Record everything. I told Sarah. No names. No jokes. No commentary. Just raw capture. Later, we'll argue about what we thought. A pillar rose from the floor in the chamber's heart, hexagonal, matching the sigil cut. It carried grooves like a palm would carry lines. My wrist badge pinged once, twice, then settled into a steady light. A question printed itself in my HUD, not in letters, but in form present charter. Show chain. Declare intent. I swallowed. Juno's hand hovered near her holster in that way that says she knows shooting would be a sin. I pushed the magistrate streamer to its brightest, a flicker of law that wasn't force, but still made my neck hairs rise. Obsidian Anchorage, I said, naming the rumor I'd nursed since we first saw the pulse. If that's you, I'm Lynn Arata, Stewardship Guild, bonded to the Triarch Court of Cressida, escorting Commander Juno Reyes under Permit A349. We are here to observe, restore, and record under audit. We do not claim salvage rights. We will not trigger lethal responses unless in defense of life. We choose process. The pillar warmed in my hands through the glove. The grooves pulsed like a slow heartbeat. I thought of a palm pressed to a window and pulled away from the thought. Evidence of charter, the ship asked, in numbers that my suit translated into human impatience. I sent the charters. One by one, our signatures scrolled by, small as ants against that pillar's face. The grooves drank them like rain. Obsidian Anchorage, I said again, testing whether saying the name twice would wake it more fully. Some things in the old histories needed being called. If you are sworn to the covenant of proportionality, you will ask us to swear back. One line lit on the pillar. Not a word. More like a cut brightened by candle. What's it say? Sarah whispered. It says, "Who taught you my name?" Answer Juno said, carefully. We don't fear names. We measure them. I learned it from a ledger that never closed. I said, a family trade. Teachers who left marks where the law could see them and then made the law look. The pillar dimmed, then brightened again, as if deciding whether to be offended or pleased. A hum rolled through the chamber, higher now, complicated like a choir tuning. Geometric lines engraved in the walls, sharped and flatted, turning into a slow ripple that shivered against my teeth. My suit flagged something I would later learn to love, pressure changes that meant life support bleeding into death vacuum through hidden valves. Atmosphere, Juno asked. Trickle. Malik said. Nitrogen and argon. No oxygen yet. It's not trying to wake us. It's waking itself with us inside. I felt the urge to ask whether we should step back out. Let it do this without our boots marking its floor. The urge walked into the same wall as the truth we were already inside. And backing away from an oath is a kind of oath, too. The pillar's face unfurled like a flower cut from maith. A window opened on nothing. Then on everything, a map of the ring yard in cross-section. Our skiff perched like a beetle. The Black Ledger Guild markers pinging at the edge of our permit zone, waiting for us to make a mistake so they could pounce with paperwork. A filament of light touched our streamer and tasted it. The ship didn't speak in words. It spoke in ledger entries becoming actions. It asked again by showing, "Show me your intent." I answered by showing mine. I opened the feed that held my research log. Not the glossed version, the one where I confessed to doubt and wrote down where I was wrong. The pillar took it, and the walls responded with a low tone that felt like approval, begrudged, and therefore honest. "Oi, we've got movement," Sarah said, snapping back to the world outside my reverie. Black ledger cutters peeling toward the gap we just came through. They're hailing the magistrate channel and the pirate bands both. "Of course they are," Juno said. "They get paid either way. Distance, 3,000 meters and closing. They're staying cold on pods. They want to ghost in. Stick a tag. Call it theirs." "Put our streamer on blast," Juno said. "Malik, go noisy with sensors. If they're going to pretend they can't see us, we won't give them the favor." I kept my palm on the pillar. The grooves had adjusted to my glove, or my glove to the grooves. My badge's heartbeat synced with the chamber's hum. Everything one slow pulse. I thought of court and oaths, and the first time I put my hand on a register and swore to rather be wrong in public than right in private. The numbers on the walls shifted into a new pattern, 6 primes in a row, then an empty space, then a single dot that glowed brighter than the rest. "Proposal," I said aloud, and felt the ship listen. "You are under lawful wreck stewardship. We have rivals who will violate process to seize you. Your oath, if you keep it, is to proportional response and public record. Use us to make that record. Make them sign a receipt when they try to steal you." I didn't know if I was praying or litigating. I didn't know how to stop being both. Make them own their method in front of their own lights. The ship's answer strobed the chamber, a flicker that translated in my visor's corner to a handshake on the magistrate network we'd thought was line of sight broken. It was not broken. It was encrypted in a way our era had forgotten and our enemies had never learned. The obsidian anchorage took the magistrate streamer, shook it, and the rings outside sang. We heard it on the hull, through our boots, a vibration like a drumhead struck by a measured hand. The lights along the channel changed color, from iron blue to the brown red of tax stamps. The pillar printed a new question in angles and dots that I would later render in a child's words. "May I borrow your law to weigh this?" "Yes," I said. Throat tight. "Borrow it. Make us witnesses." "Target's closing," Malik reported. "They're running dark with a dirty nav code. Our pings show industrial scoops. They'll snatch anything that looks like claimable ballast. Bless their honest hearts." The magistrate network blinked to full. The law's sleeping satellites, those old things that never bother small people until someone bigger makes them roll their eyes this way. A cold line of light drew itself between us and the incoming cutters, a border sewn out of broadcast. Not guns. The obsidian anchorage had drawn a corridor of attention. Crossing would not trigger minds. It would trigger scrutiny. The cutters did what cutters bred for bluff always do. They slowed just enough to claim they hadn't seen the boundary, then accelerated as if reluctance could cut liability. Their mouthpiece hailed us with honey and vinegar. "This is Guild Officer Tamus of Black Ledger," the voice said. Smooth as a ledger's leather cover and cheap as what it hides. "We see your streamer, Steward Arata. We see you have found a hazard. We are authorized to neutralize hazards briskly, then file after. Stand aside. Stand in the corridor," I said. "And repeat that." "Excuse me," his voice sharpened. "Stand where the law can hear you. Say the words again." Sarah made a small sound that I recognized from my own chest at other times in my life. It is the sound you make when a path opens that you didn't know you needed. The cutters drifted into the corridor. All at once their heat signatures seemed 10 times brighter, not because they had burned hotter, but because the obsidian anchorage had peeled off the shadow that their scramblers had painted around them, revealing what was always true. Their jammers flickered, then resolved as a neat list of illegal frequencies stamped with time and origin, pinned in the magistrate log like pinned butterflies. Temas did not notice it yet. He said, "Neutralization protocols authorize kinetic means where salvage is endangered. We will be brief." "The corridor's listening," I said. He scoffed. "Machines don't listen." "You'll want to check your ship's status page," Malik said pleasantly. "Specifically the part where your own maintenance log just notarized itself in front of 7 indifferent satellites and half a court clerk drinking tea." There was a silence. It had edges. "Who the hell are you," Temas said, "to pretend you can make the law attend?" "I'm not pretending." I said. I asked. Something older than both of us said yes. "Make them feel the weight of their own signature." Temas changed tactics. "Commander Reyes, your fleet code speaks loud. I can count the times your unit has been cut back to bone and rebuilt on credit. You can't afford to stand on poetry. We're offering you a purchase order. Move your little raft aside. I'll tag the rock. We'll sign the form. And everybody eats." Juno didn't blink. "We'll eat when the court rules somebody cooked. Until then, stay where the corridor can see your hands." Something shifted in the hum. The Obsidian Anchorage's first lawful act did not fling anything. It merely inverted the logic of what counted. The cutter's own spoofed nav beacons lit up in the magistrate registry as if they had pressed the submit button themselves. Their false claim tags now said their true names. Their insurers' addresses shone like street lamps on a winter morning, unforgiving, indifferent, perfectly clear. "Malik," Juno said quietly, "what happens if they keep coming anyway?" "They get read into the book," he said. "And then we see who believes more in hunger than in precedent." A tone pinged inside my helmet. The pillar had printed another question. This one made my stomach drop. Because it was personal in that way, only great nations and great machines can be it asked me to swear with it. My name would go into the system as the human witness for the ship's act. If we were wrong, we would have written ourselves into a myth as fools. If we were right, the book would own us as much as we owned the ink. I placed my hand flat. I swear to tell what I saw, and to pay if I lie. The groove burned not with heat, but with that intimacy that comes when you put your body where your mouth is. A stamp appeared in the corner of my HUD, the anchor sigil. Black in outline, with the missing notch now filled in with a tiny dot of bright. Outside, the cutters flinched. We felt it through the hull, a twitch traveling like a tremor through a strut. One of the Black Ledger pilots whispered on an open mic, and it made my skin rise. He sounded like a person who had just opened a door to find every ancestor he had ever wronged standing there waiting. Temas swallowed steel. "You've made your point. We will withdraw and contest later." "State your withdrawal," I said. "What?" "Speak it in the corridor. Say it clearly." "We withdraw," he said. Each word, like a bone, moved back into place. "We submit to review." "Thank you," Juno said. They peeled away with all the wounded dignity of a cat that has failed to leap a chair. Their jammers stopped pretending they were anything other than lies. The magistrate registry took their signatures and tucked them away in the public pantry, where future court days are fed. "They'll be back," Sarah murmured. "They always are," Malik said. "They eat time like it's free." I admire the appetite. I don't admire the taste. We stood for a long moment with our hands on things built by better hands. The chamber's pressure ticked up a hair. Oxygen traced itself into the mix, enough to make the inside of my mask smell faintly like wet slate and bitter tea. I had the sense of someone in a silent house going room to room. "Dusting. Obsidian Anchorage," I said softly. "We can read your corridor. Now read ours. The Triarch Court will come, and with it will come law and teeth and theater. We want you to choose. Not us, not them. Choose a path that makes us all answerable in the same light. The ship's reply was not a word. It was a motion. A panel slid open in the far wall without a sound. Beyond, I glimpsed a gallery of silent machines like pews waiting for a congregation. Learn how to be heard without raising your voice. We took scans. We took breaths. We took the first steps down a hallway that did not care if our boots were new. The passage snaked through compartments where polymers had crazed into thin skins, where reinforcement ribs looked like the bones of whales turned square. The hum deepened with each door until it was less a noise than the ghost of one. When we paused, my fingertips felt the tempo more than my ears heard it. I could have believed it was the echo of my own blood if the numbers on the walls hadn't kept changing with my questions. Are we sure we want to be inside when it properly wakes? Sarah asked. Feels rude to watch someone get out of bed. That's why we asked permission. I said, rudeness requires ignorance. We're just nosy. A hatch admitted us into a space that made my throat pinch. It was a cathedral built for counting. Arrays hung on gimbals like stars docked for repair. Their faces blank as erased chalkboards, their edges pitted by whatever storm had put this ring yard to death. Between the arrays sprouted a forest of small consoles at waist height. Each console had a slot. Each slot the exact shape of the notch we had seen in the sigil at the door. The room smelled against all reason. Against vacuum, against the will of chemistry like cardstock and faint oil. This is a ledger hall, I breathed. I thought you said it wasn't an angel, Juno said, but her voice had softened. It's not, I said, and that is what saves us. Angels deliver, and you can't appeal. Ledgers ask you to sign. I approached the nearest console, and the obsidian anchorage lit its edge with a thin line of blue. The pedestal shifted a fraction, aligning with my stance the way a folk instrument turns when you reach for it. I had the sudden uncharitable thought that someone had designed this to make me feel at home, and then the kinder thought that perhaps they had just designed it for humans like me. Malik, I said, give me a read on thermal margin. I want to know how much this waking is costing it. Heat sinks are bleeding in controlled pulses, he said. It's not desperate. It's declaring. Declaring what? That it can afford us, Juno said. And what do we pay? Attention, I said. Pay first in attention, or you'll pay in interest later. The console projected a geometry onto the air like a dancer throwing a shawl. It looked like a city map made of equations. I recognized our ring yard at one edge. The dead star's gravity cut like a brand. The long arcs of debris merging into two clean lanes where traffic still dared the risk. At the very center, a node pulsed slowly, dark-edged. The missing notch made real. The obsidian anchorage showed me itself, and then drew a boundary in a shade that felt like thought. Here ends the material and begins the oath. Prove worth, the console asked in marks a child could learn and a liar couldn't fake. Worthy of what? Sarah whispered. Almost reverent. Trust, that's what I said. No, not trust. Responsibility. The proof did not ask for violence. It asked for teaching. A panel unfolded from the console's side, a slate and a stylus, both as archaic and human as a chalkboard. I was to write, and the ship would watch, and the arrays would mirror the logic if I made a case. I wanted to laugh for sheer astonishment, because what I had in my chest was not fear, but the ridiculous joy of being asked to explain myself to something that could have simply crushed me. Say it out loud as you write, Malik said. So our recordings match what the ship sees. I wrote the first axiom that power used without measure becomes theft. The array above my console blinked in a slow affirmative. I wrote the second, that law without witness becomes an excuse. The array answered with a shifting pattern like rolling marbles. The third, that witness without cost becomes entertainment. This time, the array pulsed twice, harder. My suit chimed a tiny warning heart rate spike. Cressida's third. Juno murmured. I had to sign that one in blood. You used paint, Malik said. It felt like blood. The console asked me to apply the axioms to the black ledger cutter's approach. I set the conditions, the sequence, the intents we had heard, the corridor drawn, the withdrawal stated. The array mirrored my reasoning onto the ledger hall's far wall. The image shivered like a lake in wind as the obsidian anchorage added its own citations from an archive that could not possibly exist in this ruin, but did scans of past corridors drawn around other wrecks. Speakers long dead saying words still alive. A pattern of mercy that refused to wear a collar. Juno said very softly, "It remembers better than we do." Sarah wiped her eye and pretended dust lay on her cheek. I hate that makes me proud. I wrote one more line, a conclusion that made my hand tremble, that a ship which turns hostile logic into public record saves more lives than a ship that wins a fight invisibly. The array flashed little lights like breath after a run, then settled. Accepted. It printed. And the thought pressed against my ribs so sharply that I had to breathe out before I could breathe in again. Count what you save, not just what you survive. Our feed lit with public pings. The Black Ledger channel sputtered with angry lawyers finding that their own recovery bonds had been auto-notified of a potential claim denial, which would freeze certain lines of credit and complicate lives they had planned to simplify with theft. Another ping announced a local pilgrim convoy offering to donate a day's cooling to the obsidian anchorage in exchange for sanctuary rights along the corridor. The ship replied by drawing a small loop at the edge of the safe lane and affixing a symbol like a handprint. "Look," Sarah said, eyes wide. Civilians are reading the registry feed. They're already rerouting through the corridor because the attention makes it safer than random drift. Of course they are, Malik said. They see a light and think it's for them. And for once it is. Hollow flicker illuminated faces outside our own small story. A scrapboat captain with grease up to her elbows telling her crew to patch the leak and trust the corridor to hold. A miner explaining to his daughter why the lights mattered, why things that count, you can count back. A clerk in a distant station putting down her tea to highlight a new precedent draft with a small, pleased grunt. The obsidian anchorage wasn't just waking, it was knitting a fabric in which more people could sleep. I traced the node at the map's center. The console's stylus warmed under my hand. The way an instrument warms when your fingers finally learn where they belong. "How many arrays are here?" I asked. "And how many can light?" 53 gimbals, Malik said. "My read says 19 can revive without organ transplants. The rest need time. Time we have if we keep the corridor honest," Juno said. "If we don't, time we'll lose faster than truth." I leaned close to the console, knowing full well that my voice didn't need proximity. Obsidian anchorage. I want you to hear this in the oldest register I have. You don't remember callers. Keep it that way. Teach by numbers. Remember by ledgers. Don't ever make us kneel to be good. The array above me cooled its light by a degree. The hum softened until it was as much in my bones as in the air we didn't have. Teach in public, count in quiet, tell the cost. The cost came in. The way cost always comes when you choose the long road. Heat margin narrowed by a hair. One array refused to spin, and when we tried to nudge it, The bearing groaned like an old man deciding to forgive, but not forget. A hairline crack ran from the ledger hall's floor to the pillar where I had placed my hand. It looked like a quill stroke. It felt like a scar. Juno ran a thumb over the crack and said, almost to herself, "You'll remember that in the morning. She was talking to the ship. She was talking to me. She was talking to herself." We rigged external coolers from the skiff, losing 2 days' fuel cushion in an hour. Sarah bumped her shoulder on a lip of metal and came away with a bruise that would purple into a map of the ledger hall's edge. Malik's suit caught a sliver of slag that scratched his glove. Not puncture. Not blood. But enough to make him sit down for a minute with his head against his knees and breathe like a swimmer after a long turn. "I'm fine," he muttered. "You're costly," Juno said, and touched the top of his helmet with 2 fingers. The gesture was unprofessional. It was right. Our feed blinked a warning. The black ledger cutters had not left the system. They had retreated to the edge of the corridor to lick their pride and call their cousins. A new set of transponders flared into life, a syndicate that preferred bylaws to violence, and violence to mercy, and mercy to nothing. They would not rush. They would sue. Legalists. Sarah said grimly, "They'll claim we contaminated the wreck. They'll petition for emergency guardianship on grounds of our incompetence. They'll file in 4 jurisdictions at once and then complain that the docket is slow." "Let them," I said, and was surprised by my own voice. It had steadied. "We will answer in the corridor." We prepared. We set our cameras to angles that would capture hands and faces, not just vectors and heat. We mapped the hall not as a treasure room, but as a courtroom. We coded small measures into our open feed so that civilian eyes could follow without schooling arrows that walked, captions that spoke, numbers explained so that a child could say yes and a liar could say whatever liars say when there's no shadow left. Outside, the Pilgrim convoy slipped into the loop the ship had drawn and parked with the quiet competence of people who have survived by learning to be courteous. They sang a song that touched the hum and made it richer. I don't believe in singing to machines. I have sung to machines. Sarah whispered, "If this is faith, I'll take it salted." "Take it witnessed." I said, "Let them lose where everyone can see them." The legalists arrived as predicted long-nosed ships whose hulls carried more text than armor, full of phrases that have outlawed more kindness than guns ever did. Their lead counsel came on screen with a smile that fit his suit better than his face. His name was Albin Geyer. He has probably never been called Albie in his life and would have punched the person who tried. "Steward Arata," he said. "Commander Reyes, we commend your prompt filing. We have reviewed your corridor. It is very fancy. We are here to assert temporary guardianship pending a proper tender, as your stewardship guild lacks the capital to maintain this hazardous artifact without external assistance. Under Clause 9 of the Collapsed Installations Act, we are empowered to tag and stabilize. Kindly stand down your jurisdictional theatrics." "Stand in the corridor," Juno said. "Your corridor has no standing," he said. "It's a light. That's what standing is." I said, "A light someone else recognizes." He laughed the way someone laughs when they are about to be publicly wrong and don't yet know it. "We will demonstrate your incapacity in 8 points. First, state them here," Juno said, "so the corridor can count." He rolled his eyes at someone off-screen, and someone off-screen rolled their eyes back, and the corridor recorded both. He began to speak. He argued our lack of fuel margin. He argued the alleged fragility of the arrays. He argued the presence of civilians in our loop as evidence of negligence, not community. As he spoke, the obsidian anchorage mirrored each point and set it next to our filings, not to contradict, but to place side by side. The comparison lit not like a duel, but like a ledger. I asked a question when he took a breath. Counsel, will you state for the corridor whether your client has ever stabilized a wreck without first attaching a lien? He stared. Irrelevant. Place it in the lights. I said, say it's irrelevant where people can hear you. Juno hid a smile behind a cough. Malik's mute channel filled with a small drumming of fingers on steel. The obsidian anchorage did not refute. It reflected. It placed on the corridor's far edge a parade of public records liens attached to wrecks that never needed them. Bonds sold to families that lost their homes to pay them. Words spoken with grave lips that boiled down to hunger in a tie. Gear stopped smiling. He didn't frown. He did that worst thing where you see how much someone has been practicing looking like an unmovable object and realize they are mostly paint. Your corridor is propaganda, he said. Your corridor is daylight, I said. Propaganda hates that. Teach what a mirror does without shattering it. We proposed an audit ritual, not blood, not oaths to saints. We asked Gear to take a stylus and write his assertion that we were incapable of stewardship onto the console's slate, then show how his axioms led there. It was theater. It was exactly the right kind. He refused. Of course, because his axioms would not survive the arrays. But refusing looked like refusing. The corridor caught the angle of his jaw when he said no and looped it next to the earlier family bonds he had signed. A miner in the pilgrim convoy whispered, into a hot mic. I wanted to hug him. Gear changed tack too late. We'll file injunctions in the Dresden Circuit and the Blue Arc. We'll tie this for years. You'll run out of coolant long before you run out of patience. The convoy donated cooling, Sarah said brightly into open feed. Thank you, convoy. We see you. Little hand shapes popped up in the public stream. Children's marks and toddlers' hammers and old calloused palms that found an interface and poked it as if it might poke back. The ship drew a border around the convoy's loop that looked, if you squinted and were sentimental, like a dodgeball circle drawn in chalk at recess. My throat hurt for a second and then stopped. We accept parallel filings, I said to Gear. We'll answer in all the circles you paint, but the audit will be here. He did not say yes. He did not say no. He did what people do when daylight touches something they thought was clean. He stepped back, but not away. The obsidian anchorage dimmed the ledger hall's lights by a shade. The hum dropped half a tone. The arrays that had spun easily now required a little nudge from the gimbals. Cost. Not the showy kind, but the kind you pay in quiet, so the loud can talk. Juno looked at me, and I looked at her, and we both nodded. The way people nod when they know they will skip dessert for a while and call it fine. Count the days you keep the door open for strangers. We set watches. We took shifts at the consoles. We taught what we could and learned more than we taught. I wrote until my wrist ached. Malik sang under his breath when he calibrated the gimbals. Old songs about numbers and roads. Sarah told a girl in the convoy why light felt different when it paid attention to you. Juno slept like a soldier, one eye open in her mind, one hand on a grip. I dreamed of the ledger crack on the floor, and in the dream, it wasn't a crack. It was a river with small boats on it, and each boat carried a name. And none of the names sank. We woke to the quiet panic of a system whisper a gravitic ripple that meant a mass was moving in ways large things shouldn't. The ring yard shuddered by a millimeter. Rubble shifted like snow on a bad day. Sarah shouted, and not because she is frightened easily. The dead star at the ring's center flexed, as if swallowing. Vector! Juno snapped. Malik pulled numbers as if he were pulling ropes. A tug on the far rim just fired a burn with more fuel than they filed for. They're using a gravity quiver trick to yank a whole strut free. If they take that, the yard's balance goes off by 3 parts in 7. Our corridor loses its anchor. Pretty lights get messy. Who? He spat out a name. Not Black Ledger. Not legalists. A cult with a soft voice and hard hands. The kind that sells their hurt as a plan. They had spent months looking pious and harmless. They had spent those months loading fuel, intent. I said, and didn't have to finish the sentence. Sabotage. Malik said, they think if the big thing falls, the small truths drown with it. Juno was already moving. We're not a gunship. We are a thing people watch. So let's be that very hard. The obsidian anchorage's arrays woke like people called by their names. The ledger hall's coolness tightened into focus. The pillar lit its sigil, and the missing notch filled like a tooth the tongue finds finely. I put my hand to the groove without thinking. The consul asked a new question, one that would taste like a dare in hindsight. Are you willing to mirror its scale? Yes, I said. If we can count the lives it saves afterwards. The ship drew a line through the map that was not where I expected it. It did not target the tug. It targeted the quiver trick. It drew attention, not force, to the exact phase drift that made the trick work. And then it braided that attention into the magistrate stream and the pilgrim loop and the legalist's filing feed. If the cult lit their burn, they would light a confession that would travel faster than their mass. They'll do it anyway, Malik whispered. They will if they think nobody's watching, I said. They might not if their own donors see them snip the wire. We don't break their hands, we make them look at them. The tug burned. For a second I thought we had failed. Then the quarter flashed, not red, not warning, but that brown red of stamps again. 1,000 eyes jumped to a single line of numbers fuel tallies versus file. The difference glared. The cult's mask slithered. We heard the fight on their channel. Not with guns, but with conscience and convenience. A quarter of their crew refused to hold the line when they saw their names next to the lie. The burn wobbled. The quiver stuttered. The strut groaned. And then friction saved us because the universe likes stubbornness. The strut settled with a clang we felt in our teeth. We'll still have oscillation, Malik warned. The ring will ring. Then we damp. Juno said, ship. Can you echo correction? The arrays rotated with the patience of cranes. The ledger hall's glow shifted into a pattern that I recognized from old river engineering, low pulses sent in rhythm with the wobble. Not to crush it, but to gently hold its shoulders until it stopped shaking. The cooling margin ticked down again by 0.5%. Sarah whispered, I'll knit my scarf tighter. Malik said, I'll swap a cooler from the skiff. We'll eat protein paste for a week. Juno said nothing. She touched the crack on the floor again. The obsidian anchorage's lights answered by shading toward the color of old receipts kept in a pocket too long. Count the scars you choose over the lives you save. The legalists went quiet, not because they had nothing to say, but because they had too much to adjust. The Black Ledger cutters drifted further away with their lights off, which was the same as them standing very still and hoping the bear went to sleep. The cult's tug burned a long arc into the black and left us with the tremors. The convoy sent a little note that read, like a recipe warm water, 2 leaves, a story told slowly to a cup. I found myself laughing with Malik in the silent hall, both of us half delirious with the debt we were writing ourselves into. Juno turned in a slow circle and closed her eyes and opened them and said, okay. We've had our first public act. We made them sign their own damage in front of themselves. Now we need friends. Friend Sarah said, incredulous. We've got a corridor and a saintship and a courtroom. We have a beginning. Juno said, friends are how beginnings stop being lonely. We drafted a bulletin. We tied it to the magistrate's stream and the convoy's songline. We addressed it to guilds like ours that had chosen process over loot and gotten kicked in the teeth for it. We addressed it to small stations who lost a dock because someone else wanted a story to end. We asked them to route their traffic through the corridor to show the use that makes a law real. We promised to teach them how to draw their own lights. The obsidian anchorage drew a tiny symbol next to the bulletin's signature, a sigil that looked like our anchor cut with an extra notch, a place for someone else's hand. For the first time since we entered the ring, I thought not of waking, I thought of stewardship, and my fear tasted like a drink I could finish. Mirror their boasts back as requests for proof. Our feed chirped. A sleeker ship than any in the yard flashed a mark that made my stomach twist with complicated affection, the Triarch Court's own courier. They were early, and they were watching, and they were pretending not to be. The obsidian anchorage shaded its light so the courier's lenses could drink in every angle of every ledger. Smile, Malik said. The adults are here. Don't flatter them, Juno said. They want to be taught as much as anyone. I didn't smile. I put my hand to the pillar's groove one more time. The groove felt warmer, or my hand did, or the day did. Gear's channel pinged a request for mediation. The black ledger cutters blinked in intent to depart and attached a note that said they had reconsidered their hazard assessment. The cult's tag vanished into the dark like a lie pushed under a couch. The corridor did not dim. It widened by a finger's width. Teach them how to ask before they take. Yeah, the courier's captain hailed us last, his voice well-trained into fairness and his eyes squinting against the ledger hall's light, even though he was kilometers away. He said his name. He presented his chain. He declared his intent. I looked at Juno. She looked at me. We had a ritual, and it had room for everyone who could carry a stylus. Captain, I said, and the hum of the ship agreed. Welcome to the corridor. You're right on time. The courier's captain floated in frame, wary but willing, lips set for balance. He didn't blink at the crack in our hull or the bruise on Sarah's arm. He did look at the pillar groove where my hand lay and adjusted his voice by a half step. People who've been in rooms where oaths matter do that without thinking. The obsidian anchorage held its hum steady and waited for the human ritual to complete. I am Captain Ren Dar of the Triarch Courier, meantime, he said. I bring provisional observers and cold mass. I acknowledge your corridor as a site of record. My intent is to ensure you do not drown in good intentions. My fear is that you will. Juno nodded once. We'll drown in numbers before we drown in praise. Present your chain. He did. Clean links stamped with ports that smell like machine oil and oranges. The corridor accepted the names and set them beside ours as if laying out plates for a meal. Dar's eyes softened by a degree. His jaw kept the rest sharp. Obsidian anchorage, so Zai said, this is a witness we need. If you accept, do it in a way that teaches. Teach your audience how to be your jury. The ship responded by splitting the corridor into two intertwined lanes. One carried our filings, our bruises, our cooling debt drawn like a red line on a white page. The other carried the courier's chain, the observer's remit, the cold mass they had pledged. Where the lanes crossed, the ship painted a small square with a tiny anchor and a stylus mark. The message wasn't mystical. It said the place where records meet is where decisions live. Dar exhaled like a man who'd found a staircase in smoke. We'll remain hands-off unless asked. But you should know your opponents have friends with heavier hands. Names, Juno asked. The Sanctimony Cartel, a consortium of claim trawlers who tithe their scraps to a monastery that prays in the language of Leons. Their tender fleet is 4 hours out. Their doctrine is called Cowl Surround, Sanctify, Strip. Malek muttered, I always did hate cowls. Sarah whispered, hate their drafts more. Dar continued, eyes flicking to something off-screen. They filed for emergency moral guardianship in the Blue Ark, citing public hazard and spiritual dereliction. Judges there like papers with embossed seals. Your corridor has embarrassed the wrong fonts. We'll answer, I said, quietly, loudly, and in order. Mirror their moral claim with their money trail. We prepared for the cowl. Their rays rotated until their motors hummed a calm triolet. Malik measured fuel down to the last decimal as if saving rice in a siege. Sarah mapped the ring's residual electromagnetic eddies, drawing them like rivers on a child's atlas so we could punt and ferry attention wherever we needed. Juno checked latch points and then checked our faces, because she knows the difference between failure and fatigue. I drafted an open note to the Blue Ark. It was not a brief. It was a recipe. I listed inputs claimed hazard, available coolant, observed withdrawal, corridor participation. I listed outputs stabilized strut, reduced pirate presence, convoy loop, teaching rituals captured in full. I included failure points bearing 19 stutter, crack along the ledger floor, heat margin loss. I signed it where the pillar's groove had warmed my skin like a stove in winter. Send, Juno said, and the corridor carried it on a sound like chalk against slate. The convoy added a dish to our table, 2 vacuum-rated radiators, and a cable spool fat as my thigh. A child's voice asked, into the hot stream and the public ear, can we see the book when you write in it? Sarah answered, yes. Without looking at me first, I nodded anyway and felt the hum answer both of us. Ledger before laurels. Put the costs in the first column. The Sanctimony Cartel arrived the way weather does in the old epics, without hurry and with the confidence of geography. 6 tenders slid along the outer arc, hulls painted the color of parchment dipped in tea. Their lead ship flashed a symbol that made my teeth set a hood drawn over an eye. Its name was Preacher's Purse, which is the sort of joke you only make if you sign too many receipts with other people's money. Their Archon, High Clerk Maeve, spoke like a gavel. Steward Arada, Commander Reyes. We recognize your corridor, but not its competence. You will cede immediate guardianship to our sanctified tender. We will handle your filings. You will remain as witnesses, which is what you are fit for. Stand where the corridor can hear you, Juno said. We are in it already, Maeve said, and she was, which told me she had the arrogance of the truly procedural. Our doctrine permits swift cover when spiritual harm is imminent. Your ledger hall is a temptation to scavengers and a wound to the faithful. We will cloak it. I'd like to understand your cloak, I said. Its mechanism and its cost. She smiled without her eyes. We shadow the wreck from registry feeds, then assign a guardian who files under seal. We reduce the noise. We reduce the heat. We keep your pretty lights from drawing wolves. Who watches the guardian? The guardian watches herself, she said. My shoulders tightened. I kept my voice even. Then your doctrine asks us to trade public process for sealed piety. Process is for the small, she said. Stewardship is for the strong. The obsidian anchorage leaned into the conversation with a shift in its hum. The arrays drew a diagram our corridor as a braid of lights, their cowl as a single wide shadow. The ship did not judge. It laid the two methods next to each other like two knives and let the handles show their wear. Teach by comparison, do not scream stack. We proposed a measured test. One tender would attempt to shadow a small arc of the yard for 6 minutes. We would watch with the corridor and count what vanished from public record. If their method removed hazards, praise would be due. If it removed accountability, we would say so where the blue arc could hear. Maeve agreed with the certainty of someone who thinks a show cannot help but flatter a showman. The preacher's purse unfurled its cowl. Registry feeds in that sector dimmed. 2 independent haulers disappeared from public pings. A pilgrim ferry blinked uncertainly, half there, half not. In our hall, the arrays mapped what disappeared as negative space. Sarah's breath went thin. Malik's fingers twitched the stylus without touching it. Clerk Maeve, I said, careful as a bead counter at a temple door, state for the corridor which names you just hid. She hesitated. Only a heartbeat. Only enough. Non-custodial traffic. Noise. Go on record, Juno said. Non-custodial traffic, Maeve repeated, frost growing at the edges of her voice. Noise. Malik's hand hovered over the console switch that scaled the array's mirror. I tapped his wrist gently. Not yet, I mouthed. He nodded once, jaw clenched, and waited until the waiting had a shape. We let the 6 minutes pass. We let the haulers reappear and pretend they had always been there. We let the ferry blink back with a hiccup that meant at least one child on board had cried at the wrongness of being briefly nowhere. Then I made the ask. Obsidian anchorage, I said. Show us the ledger before and after the cowl. The ship obeyed like a teacher who trusts a student enough to let her be brave. On the hall's far wall, 2 columns bloomed. The left showed public registry with our corridor, open haulers listed, ferry logged, convoy loop marked. The right showed the cowl's record guardian seal, hazard down, noise removed. In a third column, the ship placed what the cowl hid an unpaid maintenance lien on one hauler, an immigration waiver on the ferry driver's cousin, a convoy donation receipt that should have cleared and hadn't under seal. None of it was lethal. All of it mattered because lives are not only bodies. They are papers that keep those bodies unbothered. Maeve's jaw tightened. Irrelevant ephemera. Say that in the corridor again. I said, let the blue arc hear you call a driver's right to breathe ephemera. She did not repeat herself. She said instead, voice cutting, you are grandstanding, and you are hiding. I said, we can stop both by writing. Mirror their doctrine back as an exam they cannot pass. We asked Maeve to take the stylus and write her axioms onto a console slate. We asked her to show the path from hazard to cowl to mercy. She demurred with perfect respect. Her second in command, a younger clerk with shoulders not yet braced by defeat, took the stylus instead. His name was Queron. He wrote a good first line. That fear of looters justifies shade. He faltered on the second that shade requires trust. He failed on the third. That trust is best when sealed. The array above his slate pulsed once, not in scorn, in challenge. It offered alternate lines without forcing them into his hand. I bit the inside of my lip because I could feel in my fingers the exact weight of the temptation to push the stylus into his palm and say, write this instead. I kept my hands at my sides. Teaching without collars means trusting someone to meet your hand halfway. Queron swallowed. He looked at Maeve. She said nothing. He looked at the corridor. The convoy sent up a little hand symbol, the universal expression for "it's okay to be seen thinking." He wrote again, that fear of looters justifies light longer than shade. The array breathed. He added that trust without strangers is a story we tell ourselves until someone dies. Maeve's nostrils flared. "You are dismissed." He didn't drop the stylus. He turned to us and bowed his head, the way someone bows when they mean respect, but not allegiance. The preacher's purse dimmed its cowl by a notch. Small things came back into public registry, like fish returning to a visited shore. "Clerk Maeve," Juno said. "Very gentle now. Your doctrine chose a lawful path when it chose seal filing. Now choose a better one. You can keep your prayers. Keep them in the light." Maeve cut the channel. The sanctimony cartel moved their tenders to the far side of the ring and pretended to be thinking. The Blue Arc pinged a preliminary note acknowledging the corridor as a site of effective public audit. In our hall, the hum lightened by a hair. I could smell warm electronics and faint solder, like a workshop after someone fixes a radio with patience. Count the friends who appear when you stop whispering. Friends arrived, not with guns, with bandwidth and clerk time, and people who know how to brew good tea. A union of haulers offered a rotating roster of watchstanders who would read corridor filings in shifts, then explain in plain words to anyone who asked. A small court in the Cinder Shoals sent 2 interns who would annotate filings with tiny hearts whenever someone admitted being wrong. The Meantime's crew strung lines between our skiff and the ledger hall, tightening the lattices we had built with tape and hope. Sarah found an old archive spool in a dead socket and coaxed it into life with a breath and a miracle. On it, a voice spoke in the cadence of a teacher faced with too many hungry minds. They called the ship by another name long ago, Cantor of Oaths. They explained the doctrine we had only partly guessed. "We teach by numbers and remember by ledgers," the voice said, gentle and stubborn. "Never by collars. When we must bind, we bind to record, not to throat." I couldn't breathe for a heartbeat. Then I could. And I laughed like a child dunked in a river. Juno put her palm to the pillar and nodded once to a ghost she would have fought beside if time had been kinder. Malik wrote the sentence down by hand, because sometimes your fingers need to own the ink. Mirror the old words without making them your master. The Sanctimony cartel returned with a new proposal that surprised me. Maeve's voice had lost some of its glass. "We will not cowl. We propose a veil public for 90% of registry, sealed for the 10 that invites predation. Exceptions must be argued in your hall with a 3-signature rule steward, witness, adversary." Dar scratched his chin. "I can live with that if the 10% never becomes 20. Juno looked at me. "Your call, doctor." I closed my eyes and felt the room like a map. Heat smells like penny copper and cheap noodles. The air we didn't have still tasted of tea. My boots stood on a crack that would always be a line we crossed and crossed again. I opened my eyes. "We accept a pilot veil," I said, "with sunset clauses and public tally. We will count exceptions at the corridor's head in numbers big enough to shout. We'll invite children to ask why the count moved." Maeve bristled, then let herself be human. "You're insufferable." "You're invited," I said. The arrays nodded in light. The corridor's border thickened by a thumb. The Blue Arc pinged a formal writ Corridor 9, led by Obsidian Anchorage and Stewart Arata, recognized as a lawful site of audit, education, and emergency precedence. The word precedence felt like a load-bearing beam settling. I wanted to sit down on the floor and cry. So I didn't. Count the debt you incur when you become a lighthouse. Debt came due at dusk. The ring's wobble we had damped earlier came back with smaller teeth and a smarter growl. 2 arrays warmed ugly. One spun with a complaint that sounded like a violin string tightening past comfort. Our skiff's cooler rattled, tried heroics, and coughed a little smoke that smelled like burned sugar and fear. Malik swore softly, loving the machine even as he threatened to throw it into a star. "We can't keep this up," he said. "We need a cold sink bigger than our pride." Dar raised a hand. "We brought a gift we were saving for a festival we never reached. A sack of phase change panels filched from a palace refurb. I can donate, but it'll put us on Raymond and regret for a week." "We're already on regret," Sarah said brightly. Juno looked at the convoy loop. "We'll take panels, and we'll ask for faith. Not the kind you write in hymns, the kind you write in duty rosters." The convoy answered with schedules. Old hands signed up for the midnight watch. Young ones took the mornings when their blood ran loud. Someone on a barge named Sweet Melissa sent us a filter with a note written in Spanglish and children's stamps. "For your tea, for your lungs, for your light." Teach them that precedents are built from habits, not epiphanies. Days passed, measured by filings and a hum that deepened like a riverbed being dredged to its old depth. We answered petitions. We denied 3 greedy grabs with a flourish of public math that made me want to frame it and hang it in a school. We granted 4 delicate veils when a victim needed a shadow to speak. We numbered each exception on the corridor, head in digits tall as ship hulls. And every child on every looped ferry could count them without asking an adult. Then came the ultimatum we had been inviting by surviving. Not the legalists, not the sanctimonious. The Red Claim, a fleet whose doctrine was simple as a cudgel. You are either ours or you are debris. They loved ultimatums the way a certain kind of hungry man loves throwing plates. Their leader called himself Consul General Barrow and had the face of a retired boxer and the voice of a headline. "Close the corridor," Barrow said. "Yield the ruin. We will not file. We will not veil. We will make a public example of your arrogance. Choose now and save your own time." Juno replied without blinking, "Stand in the corridor." He laughed the way a man laughs when he believes his laughter is a weapon. "Your corridor is a toy." Maeve surprised me by stepping into frame. We stand with the corridor. We opposed its excess. We don't oppose its existence. Claimant, file or flee. Barrow's eyes narrowed. He had expected to be the only storm. He had misread the terrain. He raised one hand, and the Red Claim's drones bloomed like thistles. Mirror an ultimatum with a contract he can't afford to break. The obsidian anchorage did not fire. It did something more expensive and more honest. It linked every Red Claim hull to its own published insurance contracts. Then linked those contracts to a clause most syndicates forget until the wrong day void ab initio on acts conducted within declared public audit corridors. The arrays wrote the attachments in bright lines across the map, like strings tied to fingers. The corridor flashed brown-red. The magistrate satellites turned their indifferent eyes. Barrow paused because sudden poverty makes even zealots blink. He jabbed 2 fingers forward anyway. Drones accelerated. Our hull thrummed in our teeth. The convoy gasped like one throat. Dar whispered, "Brace. Anchor," I said softly. "Mirror the drones' trajectories into their own insurers' live dashboards." The ship complied with what I can only call grace. On 100 desks in 20 stations, analysts' screens filled with lines pointing from their treasury to red glowing icons labeled non-coverable risk. Phones rang. People who have never held a wrench shouted at people who think a wrench can solve everything. Somewhere, a nice man who had never learned to tell his boss no told his boss no. Barrow cut thrust. But physics doesn't care what you decide after the shove. The leading drones entered the corridor's inner ring and met a wall that was all attention and no flame. Their sensors flooded with signatures of every child's handprint, every filing's number, every cooler's debt. It wasn't a blinding. It was a parade right through their sight. Their targeting stacks choked on meaning and spat out apology. 4 slammed into a dead bulkhead and dented it like heads against stubbornness. The rest wobbled and found their brakes like sinners at a revival meeting. Juno exhaled. Malik whooped once, then caught it and pocketed it like a coin for later. Sarah wiped a tear and declared, "For the public record and our own hearts, we accept surrender of drones with no gloating." Barrow snarled, "Thieves." "Sign here," I said. "We'll invoice your insurer for the dent in our dead bulkhead." He stared. He signed. The corridor added a new tally at its head. 1 dent. Paid. Children clapped into hot mics all across the loop because dignity and damage both sound better when counted. Count damage paid as care, not as glory. Barrow withdrew to a safe arc. He didn't flee. Men like him stew. He tried a new angle, the kind that wins where explosions fail. He filed a petition in the Blue Arc accusing us of creating a hazard by drawing children to lights. He attached a picture of a toddler's handprint icon. The caption read, "This is not safe." I wrote back with a picture of the same handprint and a caption that read, "This is not yours." Then I did the hard thing. I attached a list of our costs. I listed the bruise on Sarah's arm and the scratch on Malik's glove. I listed our lost fuel. I listed the crack in the ledger floor. I listed the dignity we owed Barrow, even when we wanted to spend it. I signed it with the groove and with my mouth. The Blue Arc returned a draft precedent that tasted like iron and hope. Public audit corridors produce safety by substituting scrutiny for secrecy and teaching for terror. A child may watch and keep their name. A tender may file and keep its faith. A claimant may challenge and keep his teeth in his mouth. Hazards produced by light are lesser than hazards removed by it. The court asked us to propose the doctrine's name. Sarah whispered, "Mirror Mercy," and I wanted to hug her traitorous, brilliant heart. Teach the name that will outlast you. Make it small enough to use. We convened a last ritual before the doctrine could stick. We invited Maeve, Dar, Quarun, the convoy elders, the hauler union, even Tamas from Black Ledger, who came out of embarrassment and curiosity in equal measures. We invited Barrow. He declined with contempt, which is a kind of attendance. We stood in the ledger hall and drew the doctrine on air with the ship's arrays like a carpenter chalking lines on a floor. We wrote the primaries proportion, witness, cost. We wrote the secondaries veil with count, audit with strangers, dignity in defeat. We bound ourselves to the smallest, hardest promise we would count exceptions in public numbers children can recite. We would invite adversaries to be the third signature. We would accept repair bills when our corridor got it wrong and dented the wrong bulkhead. We would not close the hall when ashamed. We would add a new tally at the head whenever we hid something and then take it down when we unhid it. The obsidian anchorage lit its sigil so the missing notch shone as if a tooth had grown. The pillar warmed my palm one last time. Dar placed his hand next to mine. Juno put hers on the crack, honest as weather. Sarah wrote the doctrine name on the console slate in letters you could love. Malik added a drawing of a cooler with a heart. because he is a better man than he knows. Mirror the enemy into a neighbor. Count the moment you succeed. Barrow's last maneuver arrived while we were still warm with vow. Red claim frigates flipped their vectors and vomited chaff across the corridor's edge, a glittering cloud of cheap chaos. Not lethal, inhuman, designed to make the corridor's cameras cough and civilian hearts skip, designed to make parents drag children away from screens, muttering that safety is boring and boredom is safe. Attention jam, Malik said, teeth bared. We can write it out. No, I said. We answer by asking. I opened the feed to every ferry, barge, hauler, pilgrim loop, court clerk, and sanctimony tender. I asked for help labeling the glitter. I asked children to tag shapes. I asked interns to circle patterns. I asked a miner's wife to mark the rhythm that matched her workday. We turned the corridor into a coloration project bigger than any one of us. And the glitter became data points. And the data became a path through muck, the way a crowd becomes a choir unplanned and right. Barrow cursed in a register old sailors use when rope burns like truth. He cut his chaff. A red claim accountant somewhere had finally gotten through to his bone. He pulled his boats back beyond the magistrate satellite's bored gaze. He sent one last message, all bile and posture, the kind of line tyrants practice in mirrors. I didn't care. I marked it red and set it in the ledger that never forgets and never kneels. Count the quiet after the storm as part of the storm. Quiet came like a kettle finally clicking off. The arrays cooled until sound hid in metal instead of metal hiding in sound. The ring yard's tremor settled into its old bones like an aged dancer reclaiming balance. The convoy looped slower and sang an evening song so soft I could taste honey I hadn't eaten. Someone brewed tea on Sweet Melissa and sent a picture of steam curling like a ledger's flourish. Sarah fell asleep sitting up, and I put a blanket over her because a doctrine that forgets blankets is a doctrine I refuse to write. We filed the final draft with the Blue Ark. We named the precedent Mirror Mercy. We proposed its stamp and anchor with a notch and a stylus mark crossing the shank. We asked for no statues. We asked for a drawer in a clerk's desk that needed opening sometimes. Maeve sent a note with 3 words I can work. Thomas sent one with 2. I'll learn. Quaron sent one with none. Just the symbol for breath. Dar prepared to undock his cold mass. He hesitated and then didn't. He cut the panels free and left them with a small bow. Commander Reyes, he said. Steward Arata. I came thinking I'd prevent drowning. I leave thinking I learned to swim. Juno grinned like a wound, choosing to be a smile. Come back with ramen, she said. We'll be hungry, Malik added. We're always hungry, I said, and the hum agreed. Ledger, not Laurel. Leave the hall unlocked. The ship made a final gesture I will remember until my body is ash. It opened a small hatch in the ledger hall floor, one we had not earned before. Inside rested a still-sealed kit older than our grandmother's fear. Tools for maintenance, styluses for oath, panels for teaching, a book made of plasteel sheets that can be written on and erased 1,000 times without losing the first indentations. We took nothing. We touched nothing. We understood the gift was not the kit, but the trust that we would not squander it. Dar left. Maeve stayed. The convoy looped. The Sanctimony cartel wrote their first exception in our hall and sent Quaron to sign. Barrow sulked in some safe shadow and sharpened a new doctrine whose teeth we will feel someday, because victory's cost includes future work. The obsidian anchorage settled into itself like an old scholar choosing a chair, and I realized stewardship is not a task. It is a posture you renew every time you breathe. We set the corridor's head to show tall numbers, even when nothing moved. A number of days open, number of veils counted, number of dents paid, number of blankets folded. Children can count blankets. Adults can learn. Night. As much as a ring can know. Night. Brush the yard. The hall smelled of warm circuits and tea and human tiredness. We dimmed the lights by one notch and listened to the hum like a lullaby played on a machine that remembers your mother's voice without ever having met her. I put my hand to the pillar groove and whispered what I would teach if any world asked. Steadiness is not stubbornness. It's a ledger of kindnesses paid on time. Process is not piety. It's a way to share air. Mercy is not soft. It's the hardest math because it keeps counting after the fight ends. We taught by numbers. We remembered by ledgers. We kept our throats uncollared and our hands inked. The anchor sigil on the pillar lit once. Patient, exact, and kind. The corridor head blinked a new ledger entry. The arrays cooled with soft breaths you could feel through your boots. We will not close this book. We will keep it legible.